You're gonna get a. Okay, that's what I wanted. All right, everybody, let me get my slides going for us. Thank you to all of you who are showing up live. We will get ourselves started here. Okay, there we go. Now hold on. I make everybody there. That makes it much easier for me. And can I do this one too? Uh yeah, I'm gonna see if I can hide that. Nope, that didn't do it either. All right. Well, I'll figure out how that goes. Welcome everyone to my Mercury retrograde. As you can see on your screen, Mercury's going to be retrograde November 9th through the 29th. It goes retrograde at about 7 degrees Sagittarius, all the way back to about 21 degrees Scorpio. So there are slides for any of you if you are new to my Mercury retrograde webinars, which I've been doing forever. There are slides that I'm going to go through very fast. However, so the PDF of all of these slides will show up in the comments section on our YouTube channel. So you can take those PDFs, you can download them, you can print them out. You've got them to refer to if any of the information you see is going by too fast for you. If you
It'll
have
be a
any
link.
questions,
It'll be a link to the
a
PDF,
link.
Kim, just to be clear,
Okay.
yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Technomaster. That's why it's called Media Monk. Um, if you have questions, you're welcome to type them into the chat pane and Leroy will answer. If he can't, he'll interrupt me when we get to the end. I'll have a few more slides that I'm just going to show. I'm not going to talk about, but at that point, we can do any Q&A if you guys have any. All right. Thank you for that. Okay, let's get this going. Here's my housekeeping slide that I put up about our website. If you don't know this, Leroy and I do new moon, full moon podcast twice a month that you are welcome to listen to. They are audio. And of course, our YouTube channel and my consultations if you want a session. Most of you might be familiar with that. When Mercury goes retrograde in two signs, it usually takes 3 months to get through just two signs of the zodiac. When Mercury is full speed ahead direct, it goes through a sign in 2 weeks. And so that 2 weeks gets expanded to 45 days. Or as you see on your screen, the dates Mercury in Scorpio, Mercury in Sagittarius. Mercury's going to spend more time in Scorpio during this retrograde cycle, 56 days. By the way, I don't have the exact dates yet, but when I do my annual forecast in early January, Mercury retrogrades reverse through the elements. The elements go fire, earth, air, water. Mercury goes water, air, earth, fire. And so it's been in fire signs the last couple of years, most of the time. Next year, Mercury will probably be in water signs half of the year, about 6 months of the year. More on that on my annual forecast. Here's your actual dates from exterior conjunction to the next one, from pre-shadow retrograde. And when we have the interior conjunction of its retrograde, you can see all of those dates and degrees on your computer, whatever your device is. The highlight of any planetary retrograde, Mercury, Venus conjunct the sun, Mars on out positions to the sun. When that retrograde planet interacts with the sun, that is the apex of the retrograde cycle, it is the greatest time for aha moments. I'll show you that slide in a moment. Why planetary retrogrades? They are phenomena of apparent motion. In other words, from here on Earth, looking at the skies, those planets appear to slow down, stop, reverse, then stop and go forward again. They do this when they are closest to Earth. And what it means in astrology is it's an opportunity for us to break free from consensus conditionings, to withdraw, to go inward. When it's Mercury retrograde, it is to break free from all of our mental thought patterns, all of the communication patterns that we have with other people. Um, and so the retrogrades are basically beautiful opportunity to individualize, to break free, become who we want to be. As you can see with Mercury ruling left brain, its retrograde cycles last for 3 weeks, and we have about three of them a year generally. There's a lot of opportunity to break free from old patternings, and especially anything that we would consider to be patriarchal distortions over the last 4,000 years on the planet. So I don't look at Mercury retrogrades. I don't look at any planetary retrogrades as really um, uh, bad things. In EA, we say any archetype can be naturally expressed or distorted. Here is Mercury stationary retrograde on November 9th. I always make my charts for Washington, D.C., and I always use 0 degrees Aries so that no matter where we are, we will all relate to the archetypes that are being presented rather than get complicated with houses. You can put them to where you live if you want to. But the thing about this Mercury retrograde cycle, it aspects every single planet, not including the moon here, because it probably moon and Mercury probably have, 40 aspects in every lunar month. I don't know. Count. It's a lot. The fact that Mercury is going to aspect Venus, Mars, all the way through Pluto 3 times each makes it a very, very active retrograde cycle. It's going to be very important for us to calm ourselves down mentally sometimes. And because we're going to have two grand trines in water, one now with the retrograde, the other one's going to last through the retrograde cycle. It's going to be important to really be honoring our emotions through this retrograde cycle, reviewing old emotional patterns, and how can we throw off those old emoting patterns? How can we converse about our emotions? This Mercury retrograde cycle is not just in our head, it's also in our heart as well. So I give a couple little sentences here. Will we remain entrenched in our emotional bias, or will we search for intuitive truths on emotional levels? We'll talk about these, but we also have 3 Mercury-Mars conjunctions during this cycle. At the same time, Mercury is making 3 oppositions to Uranus. There is the potential for sparks of inspiration or even upsets and violence with Mercury, the catalyst, the trigger, active with Mars and Uranus. Mars just made 1 opposition to Uranus. I think it was yesterday, November 4th, early Sag, Mars early Sag, Uranus retrograde, early Gemini. So we made it through. Other than we had some elections, and it looked like the Democrats really swung back with people being upset about the economy, healthcare, SNAP programs. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. But here are those trines. As it turns retrograde, we have both moon and sun involved in a grand trine with the North Node. But then we also have these trines of Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Mercury's already made 1. It's going to come back and make 2 and 3 grand trines with these planets up there. So, one more time, really, really, really honor your emotions. And when Mercury goes retrograde and draws us inward, it's okay to just say, what is going on for me emotionally? What is it that I need to work with? Now, I have a tendency when I do Mercury retrograde in various signs of the polarities, working more with the psychology of everything. It's one of the things that evolutionary astrology does a lot. And so as I go through these next few slides, it's more on a personal level. You can extrapolate it collectively. I might make a few things, make a few comments out there, like the one on the bottom of the screen that you see, but kind of look at these next few slides for yourself on a very personal level. So when Mercury goes retrograde in Sagittarius, there's a need for self-honesty and deep philosophical reflections in every area of our life because our beliefs, our philosophical perspectives are how we then manifest so much of our world, our relationships, our career, how we want to parent our children, how we want to participate out there in the world. And so this is going to be a time period to really look at what our beliefs are and to be as honest with ourselves as we possibly can. You can have the inner conversations with yourself about the meaning of life. You can have outer conversations with others, friends, or whoever is in your life on an intimate level. This is going to expose the truth versus lies for all of us, at an individual level, and of course, out there in that collective world. So, Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius can expose areas in your life where maybe you have been lying to yourself. We can all do that. We all have Sag and 9,000 Jupiter in our chart. It can be perhaps areas where you're not always being honest with others. And if that is coming up into consciousness for you in this retrograde cycle, make the effort to communicate as honestly as you can. It'll save lots of trouble in the long run. Now, because Mercury rules polarity Gemini and it's in the opposite sign Sag, it does bring up a lot of polarities on issues. And we'll have that going around in our world. We can have a family member, a friend, an intimate partner, coworker, whatever. We can have something that just is intensifying, up, bubbling over. And Mercury retrograde says, now's the time to address it. So can we calm ourselves down, listen? Can we, somewhere in here I have, can we seek to understand before we speak? It's not that we can't speak, but how well can we listen? Media is going to be in the news because Sagittarius rules journalism. So the truth versus lies on that collective level, you have to have your head in the sand and not realize we have this journalism based upon facts and we have journalism based upon propaganda. And how is that going to bubble over and deal with everything in our world? Stay tuned. We'll see what the news brings up. Again, those philosophical discussions around moral, religious, spiritual issues in evolutionary astrology, we always talk that they are about inclusive versus exclusive principles. Inclusive, giving, sharing, including. Exclusive, taking, hoarding, and excluding. And if you look out there on a political level, you can see this with the SNAP benefits known as food stamps. You can see it with the healthcare issue that's created the government shutdown. This is big issue on including or excluding. How is that going on for you in your world on a personal level? Is there someone in your life that you feel is more on that excluding side of something? And it's time to have a deep philosophical conversation with them. Is somebody coming at you from that perspective? And it's there for you to listen to what they're saying and see if we can move forward, find that common ground, and perhaps reach a new homeostasis of broad-based understandings. Sagittarius rules nature and natural spiritual laws and principles in the world of EA. So when Mercury's retrograde in Sag, I like to say Get out in nature as much as you can when you're upset. If all these Mercury aspects, when they just stir things up for you too much, can you just get out and take a walk? If you live in a warm enough climate, can you just go sit outside and listen to the birds and listen to the wind and listen to nature as best as you can? That can go a long ways towards helping you calm down with all the energy that's going on. And this is going to be an excellent time period to review how you, on a very personal level, can support nature with the whole issue of climate change. Um, Side note, we actually had a bookstore reopen in our little community, and it's a chain bookstore. So many of them closed down. One reopened, and so Leroy and I earlier this fall treated ourselves and said, let's go buy some books. So between the two of us, we picked out about a half a dozen books. Um, I can't remember if I picked it up. I think I picked the book out, but Leroy read it first. It's called The Sixth Extinction. Oh gosh, I can't remember her name is. Elizabeth with a K. Anyway, you could easily find this book, The Sixth, as in the number six. In other words, there's been five mass extinctions in history, dinosaurs being one. This is now the sixth one, and her book is 10 years old, so it's now out in paperback, and I just came across it. Anyway, she's talking that, they're talking, the whole book is about how humans are causing all these mass extinctions in the insect world, the forest world, the bird world, all kinds of animals and species. I'm only about halfway through the book, but I'm finding it fascinating. And so my goal is to finish it through Mercury retrograde in Sag and just get in touch with it for myself. So one of the things that Leroy and I are trying to do, and we didn't consciously set out to do it, but it's what's turning out, is we have been reviewing our groceries and our meals and our cooking. And so we are trying to cook what we have instead of running out to the grocery store. Mind you, we made what? 10 pounds of soup today using up vegetables and grains. You get the point of what I'm saying here? Mercury retrograde in Sag. How can you entertain a different relationship with nature? And Mercury retrograde into Scorpio, relationships outside of yourself. There you go. There's some opportunities for you. The Mercury Uranus opposition aspects are going to create the need to quiet our mind and listen to our intuition. In other words, Mercury retrograde in Sag, trust our intuition when it pops up instinctively. And here's where I said, seek to understand first, then speak, then communicate. Sagittarius is the teacher versus the preacher. It is the teacher and the preacher. So, with that, can you practice new methods of communicating? In other words, can you practice giving a more complete picture of something that is going on for you in your world rather than just babbling off words? The Gemini polarity, and again, I'm not going through everything completely. We've got the Mercury aspects coming up to help us with that. The Gemini polarity, again, that is the outer side of Mercury active polarity. Multiple communications until common understandings are reached. This is true for Mercury retrograde in general, no matter the sign, and it is emphasized with the polarity of Gemini. It is emphasized with Mercury aspecting every other planet. Talk it out, talk it out, talk it out, talk it out. If you need to. Gemini is breath in, Sag is breath out. Gemini takes in information, Sagittarius makes sense of it. And so, this Mercury retrograde, if you can take time to breathe, slow down, think about it. What would be the best way to communicate this? If it is a sensitive subject that you are just don't know how you're going to talk to this person about it, write down some bullet points because that will help your mind process through what it is you want to say and perhaps how you want to say it. So there can be this sense of too much to do, too much to do. And I'm a good one with that. I have Mercury half a degree from my sun, and I'm much better with Mercury retrogrades than I used to be. But I have learned how, okay, this is how I've got to pace myself with all of this on my list. And also a biggie with Mercury retrograde. I got a slide way at the end for this. How can you prioritize addressing it in a whole manner? Okay, versus, oh, well, I'll go reorganize that later. I just want to get to this point. Or I'll clean that, closet out later. I just want to find this blouse that I haven't worn in a year or whatever. Mercury retrograde. How can you address something on a more complete level? And that will allow you that process of releasing and letting things go and letting ideas go as well if they're just no longer serving you. Now, one of the things to understand about both Gemini and Sagittarius, but as we look at it here with this Gemini polarity, Gemini is active polarity and it wants to go, 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 go. Well, eventually it's going to reach a wall. It's going to reach the boundaries of security and start to feel insecure. Any archetype does that, okay? Especially the cardinal ones, but they will all do that. Eventually, Gemini of itself, the third house, it's taken in too much information. It can't take in anymore. It's go, 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 go until it's exhausted. There is a natural contraction cycle with Gemini. There is a natural implosion cycle. And Mercury retrograde will trigger that. Wherever you have Gemini in your chart, wherever your third house is, whatever's planets are in any of those, any Mercury retrograde can create that for those areas of your chart. And so honor that going inward of the Gemini polarity from time to time. How many of you know people with Gemini risings that just, never take a breath? They just talk, 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 talk. And every once in a while, you'll run into them and they're just nothing. I have a niece who's a Gemini rising, and guess what, Aunt Kimmy? Guess what, Aunt Kimmy? Guess what, Aunt Kimmy? All the way growing up, she's now a teenager. Mm-hmm. Mm-mm. And so I'm like, I'm just gonna have to wait a while for that Gemini rising to come back out and meet with me. So understand and honor when you get that shutdown during Mercury retrograde, and especially because you have it in the polarity in Gemini right now. Recognize the relativity of truth. Okay, Sagittarius, distortions of Sag is it's my way or the highway. I've got the whole truth. And Gemini polarity comes and busts the bubble and says there's many paths home. And so, one of the things that we've got to do during this retrograde cycle is recognize the relativity of truth on the path to universal truth. So all of us can have some personal, cherished beliefs just busted apart in this retrograde cycle. It's just trying to expand you into a broader awareness, a larger awareness of truth. And we have to be able to honor somebody where they're at. If you can do this one path of recognizing the relativity of truth with others, it can help calm you down with that political polarity in your world, wherever that may be. Leroy is very used to me walking into the living room, You just got to mute it, honey. You just got to mute it. He's like, can you not just be objective? I go, nope, too triggered, got to mute it. I'll just walk up. And so I have my own Sag archetypes where I've got to like, okay, Kim Marie, can you just calm down? Allow them to be on their journey. They'll wake up sooner or later. So, how are we all doing this in our personal world? Mercury's going to throw that up for us to work our way through. Now, remember that earlier slide when I said that Mercury is going to be in Sagittarius for 41 days? Well, Mercury is going to be in Scorpio 56 days, almost 2 months out of that 3 month cycle. Intensity. There's our word. When Mercury retrogrades back into Scorpio, seems like every issue or all the things that were, buzzing around with Sag, coming to the surface with Sag, they're going to build up on emotional levels and demand some type of release. Count to 10, count to 100, go take one of those big long walks that I was telling you about. Do your breath work so that you can do your best to move through the buildup and work to create your own emotional release. So, when the intensity of Mercury retrograde in Scorpio is happening, one of the things you can do is how is the universe asking me to evolve? All right, Source, what are you asking me to learn? What are you asking me to recognize? What are you asking me to change in my world? Scorpio is fixed water. And if you can ask those questions, then Source can reveal to you Mercury retrograde, and you can calm down the cataclysms that can have a tendency to happen when we have planets retrograde in Scorpio. So, as Mercury retrogrades back there can be confrontations. And so, if there is a blow up that happens in communications, the intent is to create changes in a relationship, in an environment, in how you are communicating. And so, we're human beings. I'm a Scorpio. Bless my dear sweet husband because I can get pretty gall darn direct and loud. Even if I'm tiny, I got a loud speaking voice. It's okay to say I'm sorry. It's okay to say, okay, my emotions were getting the best of me. I got that release over with. I've had a little bit of time to process. Here's what I think was going on for me on emotional levels. Okay, I'd like to communicate about them now that I have figured out my emotional trigger that was taking place. Because we've got to realize that that world out there, we can't control that. We co-create with it. Scorpio teaches us the limits of power. Scorpio teaches us power over, power under. And there will always be a greater force of power out there than us. Again, that's that collective level that can just really, pisses me off a lot. So, what I can control is how I choose to react to it. Too triggered, walk away. Got to process my way through it. Okay, can I find the Ho'oponopono prayer, the Hawaiian forgiveness prayer, and work my way through it with this situation, with this person, and help myself calm down again? Can I reach for that inner self reliance, the Taurus polarity, to help me calm down with the outer world or an outer situation that I just can't control? So, this is a natural time period where we review what types of sources of power we want to align with. Scorpio's always about osmosing or merging with whatever we perceive we do not have. If we get too clinging with that, we get codependent. If we step back into the Taurian next level of self-reliance, we take that osmosis with us and become more than we were before the merging. What can happen here in this Mercury retrograde, especially in that consensus world and that consensus collective world? We can we can want to merge with negative sources of power, separating desires, separating forces of power. You know, um, you know, not feeding and clothing the poor as Jesus, the evolved human, actually taught. So, what do you want to align with in your world personally? And I'll show you in a couple of slides with the trines to Saturn and Neptune retrograding back into Pisces one more time for a few months. This is an excellent time period in this Mercury retrograde to really do our own inner emotional connections with source energy to give us greater inner peace on the mental world. Scorpio deals with that dual desire nature, separating desires, anything and everything, returning desire to no source. This can be a time period, Mercury retrograde Scorpio, when we become aware of separating desires that no longer serve us, that no longer fulfill us. Can we naturally work with letting them go, whatever they may be? Again, separating desires or anything and everything that's manifested. And maybe it's not that we have to let that separating desire go. Still going to need a house to live in, still going to need to wear clothing so we don't get arrested. However, can we then take that separating desire, put it in service to source energy? How can we perhaps participate on collective level in dealing with enough housing for everybody, with the fairness of housing for everybody? That was a big issue in the New York City mayor's race. So, just a little example, but hopefully, maybe this is sparking something for you where you're doing some releasing in your world, letting go and allowing a deeper connection to source energy coming through emotionally and mentally. This can be a time period for deep inner cycle analysis to recognize where we might be stuck in our thinking. So, why do I think this way? What's my motivation for thinking that way? What's my emotional patterns? If you've heard of Esther Hicks and the teachings of Abraham that she channels, they talk about reaching for a better feeling thought. And so how that emotional mental body really works together. That is very emphasized in this Mercury retrograde cycle. So how can I reach for a better feeling thought? Why do I keep going to this negative emotional patterning? Can I use Mercury retrograde to change it? What am I clinging to for security reasons? That can be a lot of those inner intentions and motivations. It's to be secure. So, relationships, can we find the courage to make any necessary changes in whatever our relationship patternings are? If you are in an intimate relationship, can you go for the deep conversations? What needs to change in our world at this point? You know, talking about the teachings of Abraham, um, one of their sayings is, wouldn't it be nice? And then rephrase a negative statement. Practice saying that in whatever's going on for your world or with your partner. Having all the Scorpio I have in my chart, my partner's pretty good at coming back on me. Kimmy, wouldn't it be nice? Blah, blah, blah. And see if you can work through that. We're going to have to be careful. We can become aware, but we're going to have to be careful of attracting in others who want to motivate us or manipulate us. Motivating us, the more positive, coming from the Taurian polarity of self-reliance. Manipulating, coming from the more negative, probably wanting to have some type of control over us. Are we doing that to our partners? Are we doing that to other people in our world? The psychology of Scorpio can make that awareness in our consciousness so we can stop, think before we open our mouth or put it in motion. Mercury Mars conjunctions. Here's the classics with Scorpio. Death, sex, taxes, shared resources in our life and in the news. Of course, we can have the classic betrayals of trust and love affairs that are exposed. We can have the relationship endings that blow up. We can have relationship new beginnings. I always say if they come through when a planet's retrograde in Scorpio, you want to take it slow. You want to take it very, very slow. I think that before this Mercury transit through Scorpio is over, there will be more things to come out with the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. The Republicans in Congress can not go the next year or year and a half without seating that new representative. I think it's New Mexico, a female in New Mexico, who would be the vote that then allows the Epstein scandal things, the names and all that stuff to be released. I just expect that stuff to just bubble back up, especially if they can end the shutdown. They have to see her in Congress. He can't, again, Speaker Johnson can't keep them out of Washington forever. Stay tuned. Let's see if Republicans manipulate if Republican leadership manipulates one Republican to switch their vote so that it doesn't go through. Stay tuned. We'll find out. Mercury retrograde in Scorpio can bring up issues around resources, money, and finances. They can be lost or gained depending upon prior efforts and karma, especially with the trines in water signs. I know that Bitcoin dipped a while back. I don't watch it very closely. I don't know if it's come back up, but the cryptocurrencies, the NFTs, I think they can come in the news again with Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. There are those that wonder if there are some bubbles going on or even perhaps some Ponzi schemes going on in those areas. Stay tuned. But I think one thing really starting to be exposed here is how Donald Trump's bill that was passed last summer is really attacking and exposing what was taken away from the least of us to the benefits of those that did not need a tax break. I put this slide in my Mercury retrograde back in March when this was just coming up. This is what passed. These are the facts that are coming out right now with the government shutdown to the degree that those that don't watch the news, those that don't pay any attention to information, Sagittarius, Gemini, are now seeing their pocketbooks hit. The loss of the SNAP benefits, although half a month for the first half of November is now judges have ordered the Trump administration to release funds that are there. But we're going to look at the whole health insurance and all the Medicaid stuff again coming out in the news through this retrograde cycle, shared resources, Scorpio. And I think this stuff is going to continue to expand over next year going into the midterms. Um, I saw something in the media where a Democratic pollster said, um, Democrats only have to say 4 words through the midterms. I want a repeal, meaning I want a repeal of tax cuts to the rich. I want a repeal of cuts to Medicaid, etc. Democrats run on though that platform, the masses will hear. Um, I won't. I'll leave it at that point. Taurus polarity. Sometimes we had to slow down the communications. I'm just rattling away here. Thank you for letting me do that. But in some of our communications, and especially if our emotions get triggered, sometimes we just got to quiet down. Not only that Gemini polarity going inward, but Taurus may need to process for a while. It may need to inwardly think on it before it can really communicate what it wants to say. Because Taurus is fixed earth, that physical security becomes very important. And so if there's any threats to our outer security, that can be part of, you know, just turning us inward. Because the Taurus polarity says we've got to reach for that deeper inner security. It probably will be such that all of us are going to get security buttons pushed. All of us are going to get that Scorpio confrontation in some way. If we dig in, Taurus, and just insist on our way and get stubborn about it? Or do we do that inner work? And this is where Mercury can really work with those inner affirmations. This is where we can change our values around resources. Can we see ourselves as a resource? In evolutionary astrology, there is, um, Jeffrey would teach this concept. Consensus consciousness sees security in the outer world. It's my bank account, it's my stuff. Individuating security learns to see itself as a resource. Spirituating Taurus learns to recognize that the ultimate source of everything, the ultimate security, is universal source. So, how is this process working for you with the Taurus polarity when Mercury's retrograde in Scorpio? You could even have sparks of new ideas for things you could do for building up your own resources. I mean, learning new talents is how I call it with the Taurus archetype. Oh, I could learn to do this for myself to create new resources. And I'm fond of, telling people who are moving into their wisdom years, and that includes me. Um, it's never too late to learn. We're always evolving, physically, non-physically, when we leave the body. You can learn something for your next life. You can learn something that sets you up on your evolution into the future. So if you get those kind of sparks of, oh, I've always wanted to do this, I'm going to work on that. It may not be that it manifests resources specifically in this life, but it helps your soul build and it helps your soul evolve itself and create it in another life. We don't always think that way, but it's nice perspective to maybe think about. So here again, natural time period for withdrawal. Taurus is passive polarity, so it has to go inward, find a sense of self. Does it mean communications? Okay, sometimes we still got to be open, but we can say to that Scorpio, partnership out there or that Scorpio relationship. Excuse me, I need a little bit of time to go inward, find myself, and then I'll come back out and talk to you about it. The whole sexuality thing, didn't speak about it with the Scorpio, but that's part of that merging, that osmosising that we're doing. One of the things that we have to recognize with this Mercury retrograde polarity is we are responsible for our own sexual needs, even when we are in relationship. So taking the taboo out of self-sex satisfaction can be a mental concept we could work with if we're in an intimate relationship with our partner. Or maybe our partner wants to talk to us about it because the distortions that can be exposed are, possessive, manipulating, wanting to control or dominate all the sexual situations. But if we can work for that self-reliance, then we learn how to participate on a sexual basis as another needs to be given to versus how we want them to participate. And it goes vice versa. And so here again, we have to be careful of codependencies with this polarity. So unless we can stand back after any merging and reach a new level of self-reliance, there is that danger of codependency. And so, with this Mercury retrograde back in Scorpio Taurus polarity, the intent is to self empower so that we can coexist, not just sexually, but coexist and share resources in a multitude of different ways in our world. All right, I'm going to try and see if I can get through the rest of this now in a little bit, but I just want to thank you for letting me do the psychology. Here's the interior retrograde conjunction when Mercury retrograde passes back over the sun. It happens on the day of a new moon. As you can see, they conjunct at 28:18 Scorpio, and the moon has moved on 10 minutes. So the new moon is just like an hour or two before the conjunction. It sets up the grand trines again that I was speaking about. So, the aha point can be very emotionally empowering, or if we're going to get into the distortions, we can go into all of those power games that Scorpio wants to do. And that's what we could easily see happen on that political level. Interior conjunction, water grand trine, emotional insight, or do we get stuck in our emotional defenses? We also happen to have a mystical triangle. Okay. This is where two planets make trines, two planets make sextiles. It draws in, okay, the interior conjunction new moon with an opposition to Uranus. So it can soften that intensity of those Uranus blow ups, hopefully. Still might be some stuff exposed in the news financially. Stay tuned. I mean, I really hope we do not have a governmental shutdown that goes on that long. Stay tuned. We shall see. Hopefully, this allows enough people in Congress. Well, hopefully, they've done all the negotiating before then. But I was just kind of like, okay, all right, maybe we can move through it emotionally rather than having to do it physically. This is the USA chart that I use. I've put this up many, many times. You will have this. You can use that link if you want more research about how I use the chart. Inclusive versus exclusive trends have been the history of our country. Here is the interior conjunction in that chart. So whether the shutdown is solved, the financial issues with the retrograde in Scorpio are not going to go away. We are not going to magically see the cost of our groceries go down or the cost of our healthcare to go down. That new moon Interior conjunction opposing Uranus makes a square to the USA moon in Aquarius. Mundane charts, the moon is the people and the emotions. And so we're all feeling some of the shock and trauma with our resources. I just don't see this issue going down. If you paid any attention to the news today, there are some businesses that brought Trump's tariffs up to the Supreme Court. They heard the I don't know what they call it. They heard the talks about the two sides argue it in front of the Supreme Court. It's kind of like the news was surprised that most of the Supreme Court justices asked questions that were skeptical of the tariffs because the Constitution is pretty clear that tariffs are the right of Congress, not the president. Interesting. I mean, again, we've skipped ahead a little bit, but the second and third Mercury oppositions to Uranus are in Scorpio Taurus as we move our way forward. Mercury's always moving so fast, it makes all kinds of aspects. We use the 360 in EA. I'll show you that later. Here's all of the aspects. We are going to go through these briefly, one by one. Probably the biggest thing to recognize here is that this Mercury retrograde and the next Mercury retrograde are going to have three Mercury Venus conjunctions. Sometimes, especially when Mercury well, I don't know if that's true or not. I'm going to leave that alone. Sometimes Mercury will make one conjunction with Venus and then moves on. Every so often, if I'm correct, it would be like every other year. Um, they end up having three conjunctions. This time around, the Mercury Venus conjunction, Mercury goes direct. Then there's another one when it's direct. Then Mercury goes retrograde with the third conjunction. So we've got two retrograde cycles where they're just going back and forth with each other. Conscious mind and its values. It's going to put an emphasis in communicating about how our value systems are evolving. How does this affect all of the Venus stuff going on? Venus is in Scorpio, Aquarius, and Pisces when those three conjunctions happen. They are inner planets, they are fast moving aspects. But the Mercury retrograde cycles are saying, oh, let's take a minute and really look at what is important to us in our world. Then Mercury makes three conjunctions to Mars. Sometimes it makes one, sometimes it makes three. It just varies. It makes a conjunction in each of the different signs. And so there's strong initiatives, Mars, to act upon the evolution of our desires, especially as they are exposed through Mercury Venus conjunctions. And so there's a lot going on here that Mercury's making us aware of how we want to personally move forward in our world. And because it's Venus and Mars conjunctions, it can involve relationships. It can involve those intimate relationships. Now, we want to act. We've got to simultaneously practice patience because it might not be until the third conjunction or next year early before we can really see things perhaps moving forward for us. So you can honor the emotional hits, communicate through everything as best as you can, have those multiple conversations, move forward with Mars as best as you can. And if it doesn't quite go forward, wait a little while, try again. Wait a little while, try again. And because Mercury makes three conjunctions to Mars, three oppositions to Uranus, I'm saying here, use caution, because these are the two planets that can really create upsets and accidents, and Mercury is the catalyst, the trigger. All right. So kind of be careful out there in the world. I'm not telling you to be fearful. I'm saying be aware, be conscious, Mercury. And Mercury makes waxing trines to Jupiter. And here's what's interesting about this Mercury retrograde cycle. When it goes stationary retrograde, it makes excuse me, Jupiter goes retrograde a couple of days later. You can see it right here on your screen. All right. And so I said, left brain Mercury, right brain Jupiter, they have to meet in the emotional intuitive middle. So our emotional bodies with Mercury are throwing off old emotional patterns. And Jupiter going stationary retrograde in Cancer, the other water sign. Cancer is that inner emotional self-reliance. I rely on myself to meet all my emotional needs. Those two stationary retrograde together, again, here's those emotional exposures and upsets that can come to the surface. How can you address them? How can you intuit through it? What are the old emotional patterns to throw off? How can you communicate about your emotions? Just like we say Mercury retrograde, you got to talk it out, talk it out, talk it out. This Mercury retrograde, you got to process through those emotions multiple times, talk about them multiple times. It can be, I thought we went through this. Well, okay, I'll be patient. We will go through it again. Then Mercury makes waning trines to Saturn and Neptune. And here's the other interesting thing. At the end of this Mercury retrograde cycle, Saturn is finishing up a 4-month retrograde cycle, and it goes direct 2 days before Mercury goes direct. So it adds punch to the ahas of Mercury direct and being able to move forward, Saturn direct, with whatever we have been reviewing through this retrograde cycle. Saturn's going to ask us to have a grounded reality with our emotional body. No hanging out in the Piscean clouds. Saturn direct, the last time in Pisces for the next almost 30 years. How do I put my feet on the ground? How do I ground myself emotionally? And I'm telling you, the ahas can really come on emotional levels with this stationary direct together. So the waning trines, okay, can reveal a lot in our intimate relationships and with Saturn Pisces in our spiritual relationships. So we want to do our best not to be a trying couch potato. Two, make that effort to emotionally mature, however, we're being asked to do so. To make that effort to participate in the world, personally and collectively, Pisces, however that's being exposed to us. We talked a bit about these oppositions. The first one was in Sag, Gemini, barely offered us some insights here last weekend, right around that Halloween time, if you want to just reflect back. But the next two are back into Scorpio, Taurus. And so this is going to be exposing whatever is not emotionally sustainable for us. And it's going to emphasize that inner security. And again, collectively, it's just going to expose the extremes between haves and have nots that can be taking place around the planet. So, one more time, how will politicians choose to end the shutdown? Will we do our best to keep 24 million people on Obamacare? Republicans have had 10 years to come up with the plan. The only plan that they have is to just take Obamacare away on the whole principle that it's related to Obama. Stay tuned. utilize it again for yourself to do all your own, you know, sparks of insight and deep emotional ahas. Here's the waning trines to Neptune. You know, Mercury retrograde in Scorpio is a fantastic psychological detective, and especially on emotional levels. And so we can recognize what is the truth for us and what's a lie. And it's quite possible that that could also be taking place on a collective level. We can have Donald Trump saying all the time, groceries are coming down, groceries are coming down. So, well, pocketbooks don't lie. You all know what's going on because chances are you guys buy groceries. Spiritually, there's an opportunity here to have some real deep connections with universal source. These trines are not only taking place in the 29th degree, the 30th degree of Pisces, they are taking place in the last degree of the circle, the 360th degree, the last degree of the circle. This is where we want to have that emotional connection to source. And if we work with that through these trines, then Mercury can spark some wonderful moments of awareness for us. It can, spark that classic, you know, emotional merging with source energy. And that's what you would want to be asking for. How do I merge with you, Source? How do I co create with you, Source? So that I'm at peace in my world and I'm at peace in the world. The opposite of this is during Neptune's 14-year transit in Pisces. In the last decade, we've had a lot of the consensus world buying into a savior complex. We've seen evangelical Christianity turn into nationalistic Christianity. How many of the consensus Christian nationalists have put Trump in there as their savior? Those are the distortions of Neptune in its own sign. We want to be releasing that as best as we can, and we want to energize as best as we can. Everyone connecting to universal source on natural levels. And may Mercury please be the trigger to help us do that one more inch, one more degree, one more little step, somehow, some way. Finally, Mercury makes waning sextiles to Pluto, the 300-degree mark. The intent of these sextiles is to intuit broader levels of natural laws and truths, Sagittarius. So, what no longer makes sense? How can I communicate better? The distortions are where we want to defend our truth as the only truth. We blindly follow the media propaganda. But there's also potentials here for masses to recognize the differences between them and the billionaire class. That's Pluto and Aquarius. The distortions of Aquarius can be elitism, it can be the whole royalty thing. Isn't it interesting that they're calling them no kings protests? And then the whole thing of Aquarius, 11th house and ruler Uranus is finding that unity and diversity, the initiation of the Aquarian age that Pluto's 2-decade transit will do in Aquarius. And so, are we starting to see the inklings of this breaking through in consensus world through their pocketbook, Pluto? Who has the power? We're going to have many situations. They're going to build up to Plutonian releases and metamorphoses. We can see some of these through this Mercury retrograde cycle. We're also going to see the intensification of the power over power under on a political level. We could see Donald Trump try to increase using the military on its own people. I mean, think of the genius of the No Kings protest taking Aquarius and coming out as, frogs and clowns, and how they can have what, upwards of 7 million people peacefully protest. Interesting. Um, I've been kind of fascinated with watching some of this. Then, of course, I'm probably preaching to the choir to say, Mother Nature has the ultimate power here. And natural law is just responding to all our human-made actions. So how can you align yourself with that natural world, Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, and maybe minimize some of the uses of your resources? I'm just briefly throwing up Donald Trump's chart. Okay. The conjunctions happen more or less 2 out of 3 with Mercury Mars happen in the fourth house, one in the third, communications. All of the Mercury Uranus oppositions happen in the fourth house and the 10th house. And so he may be realizing some limitations of power, 10th house, because masses, mundane astrology, moon, fourth house, are saying we don't agree. I'll leave the chart at that. Here is the Mercury stationary direct chart. By that time, Venus has went into Scorpio, and it makes a grand trine in water along with Mercury and along with the moon traveling in Pisces with Saturn and Neptune. And so resources might still be in that picture. Scorpio, those shared resources. The oppositions with Uranus that Venus will especially be making to Uranus. One, okay, more of those stark differences between the haves and the have-nots. Will we have some emotional consensus that then has us start taking the mental efforts, the communications, the ideas, the press, the media, on how we want to address economic issues in this country throughout history? Whenever the haves and the have-nots, whenever those extremes have become too much, there has always been a rebalancing. Sometimes it comes violently. Sometimes it's the debt jubilees that the Bible talks about, where the kings and the pharaohs wipe out the debts of the poor just to keep peace. Stay tuned. We will see how this kind of manifests for us in the United States. Thank you, any international listeners. We'll see how this is going to manifest for us throughout Pluto and Aquarius. By the way, I participated. There is a YouTube channel called EA Zoom. If you're familiar with it, I participated in a panel discussion today with 3 other astrologers. It's free if you want to search for EA Zoom meetings. We specifically went over the USA chart, short term, long term, just kind of free flowing back and forth. And it so happened that there was a young evolutionary astrologer who spoke up and thanked me for exposing her to the Michael Casey's chart with that I use with the Virgo rising. And so we kind of focused on that chart, not all of it. We expanded it beyond any house system and just working with the signs and archetypes. I would go listen to it. It was a very good discussion with lots of philosophy and some really good bullet points for you if you would like to look at some of these aspects that are coming up, especially big aspects way beyond a Mercury retrograde. I always like to finish up with a few phrases. How do I slow down and breathe and pace myself? How do I inwardly listen better? How do I trust my intuition with what is best for me? How do I honor my emotions? How do I deeply engage with others on authentic levels? How do I co create with the universe in healthy ways? All right. Thank you, everyone. I am now just going to go through a few slides here. These are future Mercury retrograde cycles, and here's the next time I'm going to do a Mercury webinar. If you want to put that into your calendar already, look at what I said here. Mercury's going to be retrograde in Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio. When Mercury is retrograde in one sign, it's a 2-month passage through that sign. 3 retrogrades in water, 6 months in water next year. You talk about emotions, or excuse me, communications becoming emotional next year. Whew, definitely. How does it make me feel? How does it make me feel? I'll talk about that in the annual forecast, okay? So here's the date for my annual forecast. I always like to wait to the beginning of January. Here's this one again for you. Everything that I spoke about on my slides, I like to just put them together for people on a chronological order in case you are interested in that. So you've got them on this slide and you've got them on the other slide as well. If there are any questions from anybody, you can put them in the chat pane or raise your hand. Leroy can unmute you. Here's the cycle of phases and aspects that evolutionary astrology always works with. And here is the astronomy of Mercury. If you are new to astrology, astrologers always say Mercury can only be the sign before, the sign of, or the sign after your sun sign. And that is because, from the perspective of Earth, as Mercury goes around the sun, it never gets more than 29 degrees away from the sun from our perspective. Here's how it would look in the sky from any planetary retrograde. The first time it moves through, it's retrograde passage, and then the third time it moves through. Here are the archetypes of Mercury and how in EA I say the outer side of Mercury is in Gemini third house when it is active polarity and air element. The inner side of Mercury is when it is Virgo sixth house, when it is passive polarity and the earth element. So that can help you with some of your understandings of Mercury ruling 2 signs of the zodiac. And so here are more things about Mercury retrograde in general. Maybe the biggest one is that when Mercury goes retrograde, there's a natural transference from left brain to right brain because the polarity of Gemini is Sagittarius Jupiter and the polarity of Virgo is Pisces Neptune. And so there is my last slide for you. Can you find that time to slow down with all of the busyness and breathe deep? All right, everyone. Oh, I see there's something in the chat pane. I'm going to open mine up just in case. Oh, thank you very much, Kate. Really appreciate the comment. Any other comments or questions from anybody? Oh, okay. I'll keep going. I'll keep going. All right. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, everybody. Very, very much. All right, everyone. Go forth, be well, be at peace through this Mercury retrograde cycle. I'll talk to you next year.